Gentleman from New York, Mr. Torres, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chair Powell, the Fed has an inflation rate target of 2%. Are you waiting for both PCE inflation and CPI inflation to fall to 2%, or only one of those metrics?
So we look at different measures, but for a quarter of a century, the PCE inflation has been the Fed's goal. We've defined our goal in terms of that because we think it's the better measure of the costs and inflation that the public actually faces.
And you've said that you're willing to cut interest rates before reaching the 2% target. Is the decision to cut interest rates going to be driven by reaching a particular target en route to 2%, or is it driven by the overall trajectory of the inflation rate?
It's going to be driven by the totality of the data. There isn't a particular number that we have in mind that we have to get to. It's more, you look at all of the data, and the question we're asking ourselves is, are we sufficiently confident that inflation really is moving down toward 2%? So what's the underlying inflation rate, looking through the volatility? We're also looking, though, as I mentioned, at the labor market, and we're asking ourselves, we have to take into account now maximum employment, that mandate. So we're looking at both of those in the decisions that we make.
I mean, are you confident that the inflation rate is on a downward trajectory?
I do have some confidence of that. I think we've seen that over the past several years. The question is, are we sufficiently confident that it is moving sustainably down to 2%? And I'm not prepared to say that yet.
Okay. Chair Powell, you announced a reproposal of Basel III rather than a mere revision. Do you believe that the U.S. banking system is sufficiently capitalized in the absence of Basel III?
I've long been of the view that U.S. banks are well capitalized, and at the level of capital in the U.S. banking system is about right.
Okay. So if the banking system is sufficiently capitalized in the absence of Basel III, then what exactly is the need for Basel III?
First of all, there's no precise answer as to the appropriate level of capital. I think we've been part of developing the Basel standards. They create international broad parity. It's important that we have that. It's important that we do something that is comparable to what the other large jurisdictions are doing, and that it's consistent with Basel. And I think that's what our banks want, that's what we want, and that will be best serving the public.
But you agree we should conform without gold plating?
Some things we've gold plated, and some things we haven't. And but I think we should make. I think our end game proposal should be at the end. Should be consistent with the requirements of Basel and consistent with what the other large jurisdictions are doing.
Are you confident that there's no legal conflict between the standardization recommended by Basel III and the regulatory tailoring mandated by Congress?
I think we can work through all that, yeah.
Okay. But if there were a conflict...
Basel doesn't impose any requirements on anyone. There's no enforceable requirements. Every jurisdiction does what it's going to do. Basel doesn't bind anybody.
Right, but the regulatory framework you're adopting would codify those recommendations. Right?
Yes.
Which would have the force of law, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so if there were a conflict between the codified recommendations and an act of Congress, would you agree that an act of Congress would supersede those recommendations?
Sure.
Does the loss of Chevron deference have any implications for Basel III?
It's very early days to assess. There's several decisions that are about administrative law, and I think it's too early for us to say. I mean, ultimately, the question is, are the actions we're taking in compliance with the law? And that decision says that there will be a less deference or no deference, maybe, to the opinions of the agency, but that just means a court will be answering the same question, which is, are those actions consistent with the law?
The Fed has a target rate when it comes to inflation. Does the Fed have a target when it comes to quantitative tightening, like when it comes to what should be the size of the Fed's balance sheet?
Well, we don't have a specific target, no.
What would you consider to be a healthy size for the Fed's balance sheet?
We define it, not with numbers, but with words. And we want an ample reserves regime with a buffer, so that reserves are not scarce. And we think plentiful reserves, ample reserves is the right place to be. And we'll find that empirically.
Can you put a number on that?
No, I can't really.
For 4 decades, we've had the best of both worlds, low unemployment and low inflation. Can the U.S. economy return to the golden age of low unemployment and low inflation, or are we doomed to live with a new normal of higher interest rates?
Well, I think we have low inflation. We've got a period here of very low, low unemployment.
We have high inflation, so can we have the
do.
best of both worlds?
We certainly can, and that's the plan. Okay. We're going to return to 2% inflation. I'm reasonably confident. Some people argue that we're entering into a world of a lot of upward inflation shocks. That would be a challenging world, but that remains to be seen.
Thank you.